Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple minutes here to let everybody join in. We'll just give it one more minute. All right, we'll get started. I'm going to start with just a little bit of kind of introductory stuff so some other people can still trickle in as we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Invasive Species Center webinar series. My name is Durissa Vincentini, and I am the Community Science Coordinator at the Invasive Species Center, and I will also be the moderator for today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the Invasive Species Center honors the long history of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Nation people on the lands now known as Canada and the United States, and strives to show respect to their ancestors, their communities, and them individually. We are greatly appreciative of the significance of the lands, waters, and all living things, and offer our gratitude to the Indigenous people for their care and teachings about our Earth. The Invasive Species Center respectfully acknowledges that our head office is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Batchewana, and Garden River First Nations, as well as the longtime settlement of the Métis people in the Robinson-Huron territory. So thanks again for joining us. If you are not familiar with the Invasive Species Center, we are a not-for-profit organization that connects stakeholders, technology, and knowledge to prevent the introduction and spread of invasive species that harms Canada's environment, economy, and society. We've got lots of great invasive species resources on our website, including species profiles, best management practices, and more. So be sure to check out the Invasive Species Center's website at www.invasivespeciescenter.ca. You can also sign up on our homepage for our newsletter or biweekly media scan and event invitations, which is where you can hear about upcoming webinars like this one. Recently, the ISC has also launched a new invasive species training program that offers virtual courses on topics related to invasive species. We currently have 3 courses available which focus on different forest invasives, but we will be releasing new content regularly, so you can stay tuned for that as well, and make sure to check out our website to sign up and to receive updates on when these new courses become available. Before we get started with today's webinar, there are a couple of things I'd like to mention. There will be time for questions at the end of the webinar, so if you do have any questions at any time, please feel free to pop them into the question box, and I will read them out to our presenter after the webinar. If you are having any technical difficulties at any time, please type them into the chat box or respond to the email found in your registration, and we'll try to resolve it for you. We also have enabled closed captioning, so if you would like to follow along that way, you can turn that on with the closed caption button at the bottom of on your taskbar. Lastly, there will be a brief survey following the webinar, so if you can take some time to fill that out, we really appreciate it because it gives us ideas for our next topics for our webinars. So today's webinar is titled EDDMapS 2023, Engaging the Public, Overcoming Politics, and Solving Technological Barriers of Invasive Species Data. And I am pleased to introduce our speaker, Chuck Bargeron. Chuck has been with the University of Georgia for 24 years, where his work focuses on invasive species and information technology. Recently, Chuck has focused on mapping invasive species and tools for early detection and rapid response using EDDMapS, WildSpotter, and companion smartphone applications. Chuck has spoken at over 300 regional and national conferences and co-authored over 67 journal articles and outreach publications. So thank you very much for Chuck for joining us today and taking time out of your busy schedule. And I'll pass the virtual baton over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank y'all for joining this today. I am going to kind of talk about where we are at EDDMapS in terms of where and how we need to move forward. We've been doing EDDMapS since 2005, 2006, and over that time period, we've learned a lot, and what has worked and what hasn't worked, and how maybe we can look at ways to do things better going forward. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to bring up some examples of some things that we're doing and things other groups have done, and some opportunities on how we can kind of maybe change some of the paradigms in terms of how we look at this issue. So I put together this title for another talk I was doing, and as I was kind of researching concepts of how to think about this, I found this analysis, and it's called a pest analysis, where you look at the political, the economic, the social, and the technological issues around a topic, and how that influences that topic. And so that's going to be how I start off, and really coming back to maybe some of the social ones toward the end. So starting with technological, what we've worked on is this platform called EDDMapS. The name was, we needed something short, we needed an acronym, you know how that works. And so we thought about what we really wanted to do, and that was electronic early detection, reporting, as well as aggregating data and distribution mapping, and then tying that in to some of the existing library of resources that we had collected through Bugwood, through invasive.org, et cetera. And building something that would work at a local level as well as at a national, international level. So we created EDDMapS to try to make things easy. If you don't know how to use ArcGIS, then trying to look at a map built in ArcGIS can be very difficult. And so when we were thinking about this, we wanted it to be simple, and that's why we started using the Google Maps type format. We're using OpenStreetMaps now, but something that the user would be familiar with, and the invasive species information would just be overlaid on top of it. And I think all along it has been thinking about how we increase public awareness of invasive species. If we don't accurately know where these species are, then how can we get the public to be interested and be, excited and want to do something about it? And so, and then once we know where these species are and we start doing work on those species, how can we use that information to better tell the story of what we're accomplishing and how things are going? And then we also wanted to have this platform where other applications could be built on top of it. Since we started this, I always get asked, well, what kind of data are you interested in? Well, when we're talking about EDDMapS, we're primarily talking about occurrence data, and that is the who, what, when, where, how much, why of an occurrence of a species in a location. And so, it's pretty simple when you think about it from that standpoint. Where was it? What was it? Who saw it? When did they see it? And how much of it was there? And then going along those same lines, thinking about early detection and rapid response and breaking that down to the different areas of what needs to be done. What should be reported? How is it reported? Once it's reported, who needs to get the alert on it? Is it something new to that jurisdiction, to that state, to that country, to that province? is the identification correct? Let's make sure an expert's looking at this and we don't get excited about a sighting of something that's not actually the species. And then what kind of response is going to happen and how do you document that response? And then how can we make this data accessible, findable, reusable, so it can be built into other applications, it can be used in modeling. And so, a little history, we launched EDDMapS in 2005. That's one of the early versions of the website there. We then, as smartphones became prevalent, we built the first reporting app, which was I've Got One, focused on the pythons in Florida. That expanded to a bunch of regional apps. It expanded to us building the EDDMapS Pro platform, which I'm going to talk about briefly, and then now taking and integrating those apps into one central EDDMapS app. So there's no longer an EDDMapS Ontario. There's no longer a Great Lakes Early Detection Network app. There's just this for the general use, the EDDMapS app. And it started with, and it continues to be a web application as well. There's a lot of features through the website. You can do the reports through the website. You also, when something's submitted through the app, it goes to the website for verification and management of that data. I always get these questions early on about how much does it cost to build an app and how have you done this and all? And it's like, well, when we started building the apps, we had already been doing EDDMapS and a web interface for 5 or 6 years by then. And so that infrastructure was there. So then it just became the apps working with the website. So I mentioned the EDDMapS app. It's now replacing those regional and provincial level apps. When you open it up, it asks you where you are. It asks you what state it asks or what province you're located in. It integrates your My List, so you can have a list that travels with you in the app and on the website. When we want to add a new species, we now can push that species to the app without having to submit an update to one of the app stores. And that really makes us be able to respond to new invasives quickly. Then there's the EDDMapS Pro app. And the EDDMapS Pro app was built around this concept, focused initially on invasive plants, of I'm going out and I need to see all the data in my jurisdiction, and then I want to be able to go out in the field and select those points and say, hey, I did a treatment. Hey, this species is not there anymore. And I need to be able to do that with the ability to filter that data by what species are important to me. I need to be able to use it when I don't have cellular coverage. I need to be able to, do verification in the app. I need to be able to do those more professional tools within the app. We also realized that we had to do a lot around education and outreach. And so in order to teach people how to use these apps, in order to promote what we're doing, we've started doing an annual virtual summit that was a few weeks ago. All of those videos from the last 3 years that we've done that summit are all available on YouTube and all available on the EDDMapS website. We've also started doing virtual office hours every month. Those are on Fridays at 11 Eastern. On the third Friday, I think it is, every month. And we focus on different topics and then open it up to the audience to be able to ask us questions. And then, now as things are open back up, then doing more in-person training, because that's when you can really get people excited. And in Georgia specifically, we've got this program called First Detectors, where we teach people about the invasive species problem and then take them out in the field and let them use the app to actually map them. And so over the time, we've collected 7.6 million records. And with 120,000 registered users, not all those users are active, but they've signed up for an account. We've gotten data from 40,000 different sources. mostly focused on plants, but then a good amount of wildlife species, insect species, and some plant pathogens. What's interesting is through the apps, it logs how, you have an option to log how much time it took you to do this. And so we've now logged over 21,000 hours of collecting data within the US and Canada from users. I always get questions about different systems, iNaturalist, GBIF, IMAP Invasives, the USGS non-Indigenous aquatic species database, and how those relate to EDDMapS. And so that's something I wanted to put together, because with EDDMapS, we're covering more taxa. We've got those built-in tools. And so there's a lot of areas where tools like iNaturalist or GBIF don't really fill all of the needs that we're trying to fill with the EDDMapS product. This is a recent thing we put together that I really am excited about, that shows how many active users. These are users who have reported something, who have done a verification, who have interacted with EDDMapS each year, and seeing this steady growth, and knowing that some years you have, you don't always have the same users. So looking at who's actually doing something every year and how that has grown over time. So where we're at today is we think of EDDMapS as the ultimate aggregator. We're pulling together not only invasive species data, but biocontrol data, as well as some native pest data, and trying to build tools to work both at that national level, but also at the state and provincial level, and then down to a very local level. We're currently looking at, continuing our data recruitment and then just enhancing the tools we've built and how users can use that data. One of the things is that we've spent some time on is the iNaturalist part of it, and looking at data from iNaturalist. If you go to iNaturalist, and this was a few weeks ago, there's about 129 million observations in iNaturalist worldwide. Well, how many of those are things that we care about in the US and Canada that are species of concern to us? So we started looking at that, and there's about 3.7 million records over time that we have pulled into EDDMapS of species of concern that fit into the US or Canadian borders. Since then, we've moved almost 500,000 of those into EDDMapS for review and verification. This is done at the provincial or state level, where the state provincial verifier can go in, review what's in what we've pulled from iNaturalist, and make a decision on whether that's moved into EDDMapS or not. We also pull data from the CalFlora system through the same system that we pull in data into iNaturalist. So there's a huge amount of data from CalFlora. So California gets the most in terms of data coming in from iNaturalist, and that system, because CalFlora is there as well. Ontario actually is the second group that we've pulled the most data in, or the groups working in Ontario pulled the most data in. And then, as you can see, it kind of filters off based on that. And this is just a lot of this depends on how the state's managing the data. Looking at the data that still needs to be in triage, that's where there's data from California, but also from some of the states where that data still needs to be reviewed, or there's species that are just not as high a priority. Looking at that data, it's interesting how much of it is bird data. Canada goose is the top species, and not a lot of people are interested in pulling that data in. And it's interesting that of the nearly 5,000 species that we have on our species, or a little over 5,000 species we have of interest, there's only data of a little less than 3,000 of them in iNaturalist. And so that's been interesting, that there's these other 2,000 species that are in our world. Somebody cares about it, but they're not showing up in iNaturalist. We've continued to improve iNaturalist, breaking things down into a county level triage, being able to filter by a species list, where verifiers can set up for notifications when the data is pulled in from iNaturalist, being able to filter by taxa group, and then do bulk actions on species. So we continue to improve this interface. And just for an example, this is looking at Georgia And so, for example, in the middle here, we've got Chinese privet, it's an introduced species. There's 3,000 records in Georgia already for Chinese privet, and then there's another 600 new records. And so this is where a verifier can go in and say, okay, I want to pull these records in so the verifiers see them. I want to ignore those records, or I want to bulk verify. Just say, okay, Chinese privet's common enough. I trust the research grade data coming out of iNaturalist, and I want to go ahead and move those and make them public in EDDMapS. And that's done on a level by level basis. Now, one of the things that's interesting, we've learned a lot about iNaturalist in this process because of it being peer reviewed. In order to be research grade, it's got to be confirmed by 2 people that agree on the identification, and it is supposed to be not a planted infestation. Well, that gets missed sometimes. And so here's a calorie pair record. You can see brick in the background. It's more than likely a planted specimen, but nobody that caught that, and so it got flagged as research grade. iNaturalist also does have some limitations on what fields are collected. And because iNaturalist's purpose is collecting biodiversity data, then it doesn't matter the exact location of the species as much. And so the privacy part of iNaturalist, where somebody can select obscured or select private, ends up hurting us in the invasive species world, because if that record location is obscured, we can't go back and do something about it. And so where there's a lot of benefits to iNaturalist, it's a great tool, there's also some concerns that we've noticed in dealing with it with invasive species data. So to switch over and talk about EDDMapS Pro a little bit, EDDMapS Pro is like I said, that more professional tool. There's a lot of features built into it. This is kind of looking at the home screen here in the middle, which is all map based. There's no field guide in EDDMapS Pro because we're assuming that the users of EDDMapS Pro know what species they're managing and how to identify them. And if they don't, they always can download the EDDMapS app to do that. And you can turn on and off layers. You can turn on and off the background layers. You can do the verification. You can filter by different things. We've also built into it this concept called photo projects. And what photo projects do, and I use this example in my living room of a ceiling fan, because it was great showing how you want to line things up when you're taking a picture. And so if you want a good before and after picture of something, and that doesn't necessarily need to be in EDDMapS because it's where you're managing, but here's a way that we can enhance the tool of EDDMapS to be able to allow you to take those pictures, store those pictures along with your EDDMapS account, and really get good summary over time. But then you can take it with that transparency going on, so you can line it up to where the previous picture was based on landmarks. We also have the option to pull in KML files as background layers. So if you're working in a project area, whether that be a park or just a ownership, you can get a KML of that, pull it in, and have it like this purple is on this map, so you can see exactly what points fall into that area. And so make sure that you're doing the right ones when you do the follow-up treatments. One of the newest features with EDDMapS Pro is the ability to walk or even drive a polygon. So being able to go, okay, I want to start collecting data, and I'm going to walk around the weed population, and then I'm going to stop collecting data. And you can adjust how often it takes a point as a part of that. And so this is one of the new features where you can not only do it as a point or draw a polygon, but you also can walk or drive that polygon. EDDMapS Pro's a lot. There's a lot you can do with it. So we've created a bunch of short videos that are on the EDDMapS training page, as well as on YouTube, to help you learn about those different features in short 2 or 3 minute videos. Again, we continue to improve it. This is thinking about that technology part. Being able to zoom to a point on the map. If you know the exact record ID and you want to be able to find that in your phone, then you can type that in and zoom to it. Better ways to stack points, having an automatic upload option and a reminder to upload your queue. And then we're incorporating in all the apps some good error reporting. So not only do you get better reports if something goes wrong, we get better reports about what goes wrong so we can continue to update the app. One of the basic things in EDDMapS is the maps, but we also, for a lot of the species, have good species information. And so, you know, there's this tab when you go to a species, this last one is species information, and you can view a description of the species. You can view selected images of that species. You can view who says that species is invasive. Why is it listed on EDDMapS? And it gives you those references. It also gives you a lot of the taxonomic information and links to why we're using the name that we are using within the system, as well as some of the other synonyms for that species. You switch over to the point maps. If you haven't looked at EDDMapS recently, we've gone to these pie chart based maps where you can see what kind of a percentage of how many of the points in an area are positive or negative or treated or eradicated. And then we're continuing to do the county maps, jurisdictional maps as we get into Canada, but being able to see that from a US and Canadian standpoint, and look at it, whether it's observational data or it's historical literature data, and see that comparison. And then in the US, because of some of the modeling work that's been done, being able to show the current location of the species, as well as using different climate models where it could potentially spread to. And there's a couple of different ways that we're doing that now. Also looking at some future abundance based on the habitat in the areas. A few years ago, we added the feature where we took a bunch of common protected areas, and we said we want to put all this in the data. And then so if a point falls within a national park, if it falls within different jurisdictional areas, that information is included with the record. And so as you can see, this was a record in Utah at Dinosaur National Monument, so that shows up. Well, now we have updated that where those links are actually clickable. And so you can click on those locational links and go to a page that shows that boundary, as well as the points within that boundary. You can even buffer that with a radius around, so you can see not only what's in the area, but what's around the area. And then if you scroll down on the page, it gives you that species list of what species are found in that area, and then how many of each of those are found. You can now download that as a CSV or as an Excel file, so you can really get a good species list for an area, as well as what's around an area. And we've tested this with some pretty large areas. Here's a large congressional district in Minnesota with tens of thousands of records, and it works pretty well even in that circumstance. And this is just an example of being able to download that data as a PDF or as an Excel spreadsheet. And we're going to continue cleaning some of this up and formatting this better, probably split the common name and scientific name. So you can get to that from an individual record. You also, under EDDMapS tools, you can get to that under the new option here called Species Status Report by other geographic location. When you click on that, it takes you to a page. You choose the country, you choose the state or province, you choose the lower jurisdiction, and it's going to show you all of the areas that are included at that local jurisdiction. So you can click on those and see more information. Ontario should have really good coverage along these lines. Some of the other provinces in Canada, we probably need to work with somebody there to be able to pull in more of the of y'all's protected areas, your important lands in there. So those are included. We were able to get a data set that included everything in the United States. And so we pulled that in, and we had already pulled in data for Ontario. And I think we've done it for Alberta as well. And here's just another example of I chose this city park in the county I live in, and just seeing it with the points as well as that buffer of around the area and how that would look. I mentioned EDDMapS being a platform for other applications. One of those other applications that we built is called ISM Track. It is an add-on to EDDMapS. We have implemented it in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and in Alberta. It is for daily tracking of chemicals and of labor. And so it takes the EDDMapS points and integrates the EDDMapS points directly, but then you can do work on top of that is hidden for only the area, only the appropriate users to be able to see it within the ISM track system. And so it's a great tool for tracking pesticide use. There's a smartphone app to go along with it. And if that's something you would be interested in, then please reach out and we can talk more about how that all works. Another tool that we built and are looking at different ways to expand in the Western United States right now is called SIPA. It's the Spatial Invasive Infestation Priority Analysis Tool. What it does is it takes different parameters that you provide to it along with the EDDMapS data, and it helps you figure out which populations should be targeted first based on habitat, based on ease of control, based on different parameters along those lines. And so it's a really neat tool. The state of Utah is actually using this to help rank their grants that are submitted to the state, because it requires them to put in all this information, and then it helps the state make a decision on which projects to fund based on the results of this analysis. Gamification is something we are continuing to look at ways to do to get people, where it's fun to do this work. And I'm going to continue to talk about that, but you've got to get them interested. You've got to get them interested in invasive species. Then you've got to get them a reason to keep coming back. And so that's where we're looking at some different gamification tools. And to sum this part up, what I wanted to say is, we've looked at the big picture, and we've kind of said, which apps can we go here? Who are the casual users? They're going to use EDDMapS app and website. We probably need a way to get data from iNaturalist and some other tools to pull data in from the public. The professionals will have some options of tools to use, and then researchers who want to get the data out would also have a different way of looking at it. So I started out talking about this pest analysis of invasive species and invasive species data. I want to mention quickly, because as part of it is the economic, there's been work over time on different analysis of economic data. This is one of the famous reports that was done on how much it costs in the US on an annual basis. There's been new reports that have come out that have said it's been $1.26 trillion in North America from 1960 to 2017, and it was averaging 26 billion a year in the 2010s. And this is part of a larger global process. We're starting to see some of these pieces with the environmental side, the economic side of things. And there's also some data that I think researchers can take from the EDDMapS data and be able to use to help better do some of this work in the future. It's all about telling the story, and this is going back to the social aspect of it. But, okay, I know spotted lanternfly is a problem, but I don't, until you put together something like this that goes, well, how much is at risk from spotted lanternfly, then it doesn't really put the whole picture together. And so I love this that was put together that really says, hey, this is how much value we have in our state, and this is what could be impacted by spotted lanternfly getting here and getting established. So moving to the social part of it, this spotted lanternfly made Saturday Night Live earlier this year, because there was a lot of spotted lanternflies in New York City. So the writers were dealing with it. And so they had a spotted lanternfly show up on Saturday Night Live. It was pretty entertaining. There were facts that were wrong, obviously, but it just shows that until a problem shows up in your backyard, in this case, there were a bunch of spotted lanternflies in New York City. And so that got their attention, and so it made a comedy show. And so you know, we all know about the murder hornet and how that showed up when we were all at home with COVID and scared everybody as the next thing. And there were phone calls all over US and Canada about it, where it had been in British Columbia, found in British Columbia the previous year, and then it showed up in Washington State. And as far as everybody knows, it hadn't gone past that, but there was still a lot of interest, and we need to help capitalize on those social things to help make sure that we tell the public the right story and we make them understand how important it is to find these things early. We dealt with an interesting one in Georgia, Juro spiders. This is an exotic insect that has shown up and is not necessarily causing problems, other than it just being, yet that we know of, other than it just being a very big spider. And so we did some targeted work along it and pulled in a lot of users, and about 1,000 new users submitted data over last summer related to Juro spider in Georgia and the surrounding states. And it was just an opportunity to talk about the problem of invasives and something that they could do something about. The pythons I mentioned earlier, that was what got us into smartphone apps to start with, and are continuing to be a problem, and are another thing that, you know, they get people's attention. And as long as you use that for the education of telling people why it's important, and this news article over here, you know, spells that out. This is important. This is why, you know, this case with this escaped anaconda, why it's important to report sightings of non-native wildlife, and here's how you can do it, and having that consistent message. And so in Florida, I've got one because that's what their phone number is as well. But being able to, across different jurisdictions now, say, go to the EDDMapS website or go to the EDDMapS app. And it's very simple, and it doesn't matter what side of the border you're on or what state or what province you're in, you can still use this tool to report things. And it just helps with the marketing. Here's some more ways, and some that were done in Ontario, just thinking about, you know, different audiences, hunters, or focusing on green space, and how you can better take care of that. I want to mention political real quick. I'm going to go through this fairly fast. You know, in the US, we have Republicans and Democrats. Everybody's fighting for the trophy. And what happens is that sometimes you don't pay attention to everything going on because you're trying to win the race. You're trying to build what you're trying to do, and you don't think about what's been done before you. And so there's an effort in the US right now around early detection and rapid response. And it's like, oh, we're doing this for the first time, and it's a national EDR system. And so, you know, some of us have been around a long time, and we start looking at it and we go, okay, well, they were talking about that in 2003. And then again, that was kind of what iPain did, that helped launch systems like EDDMapS. There was presentations on this in 2007, a workshop in 2008, a publication in 2016. There was a big effort a few years ago around mobilizing data with the Western Governors Association. You know, speaking of politics, that was a campaign because of the chair of that group was interested in invasive species. And now it doesn't even show up on their website a few years later. So, you know, we got to make sure that as we build these new tools, we clearly communicate what they are, how they build on what's been done in the past, and how they can improve things. Because the last thing we need to do in the invasive species world is spend a lot of money on something and not have a good return on that, because that will make the public less interested in the topic, because they just see it as something that okay, well, we put money in that already, didn't we? And that didn't solve the problem, so why do they need more money now? And so thinking about that and making sure that we don't recreate the wheel for some of these things, I think is very important. So my title was Engaging the Public, Overcoming Politics, and Solving the Technological Barriers of Invasive Species Data. And I'm going to say we can do a pretty good job of overcoming the politics if we all try to work together. We've done I think we figured out how to solve a lot of the technological barriers, both of invasive species data as well as invasive species in general. We know what to do with most of these species, but we still, I think, are missing the engaging the public part of it. And so we started this project a few years ago called Wild Spotter. And I'm not going to go real deep into this because I want to have some time for questions, but we built Wild Spotter. It was initially focused on national forest, and now we've opened it up to more lands. And so we're doing something with the Bureau of Land Management and as well as some states to get them included in this. And we're going to continue to grow this. And I want to bring a few highlights of it. First of all, it's just another app. It's EDDMapS Lite. The data all goes into EDDMapS. It uses EDDMapS for verification and everything else. So it's just focusing on a different audience, that public audience. And so, you know, in doing that, we said, well, how can we help that public audience? How can we give them value added to download this app and use it? And so we put in offline maps for all the national forests so they can see the boundaries, they can see the hiking trails, they can see where camping sites are. We made it very clean and very easy to use. We included a user guide right there on the home screen. Instead of asking them to put how many square feet, meters, or acres a population is, okay, is it the size of a basketball? Is it the size of a car? Is it the size of a school bus? Because that gives the person that gets that report a good estimate on how big or how much of a problem this is. And it makes it simple for the user because we don't need to know an exact estimate. That's what the professional is going to go look at. We just need to know, okay, if it's bigger than a school bus, then hey, we need to get out there if we don't know about this. And hey, if you're only seeing 1 or 2 plants, then hey, maybe there's even a better opportunity to do something about it. So we've tried to simplify that. We heard the concerns of the users who downloaded the app and did not have their local state park or their local area there where they could be added. So we allow users now to create their own wild place, their personal wild place within the app, so they can download the app, start using it, add species, and start reporting instantly. We've done things like saving the reports to the photo library. We've added badges, going back to the gamification side of things. And we've made it where you can set the auto upload. So you don't have to remember to go to the queue and upload the records. We also added in a checklist. So initially for the national forest, you can go in and say, which of these national forests have you visited? We looked, there were some of those tools that existed for national parks, but not for other public lands. So we said, let's include that in the app, give the public a reason to download this app. And then in the process, they will learn about the invasive species problem. Working on ways to build community with leaderboards, again, build a bunch of short how-to videos, and then working with different groups to include the wild spotter information on boot brush stations, customized posters, information about the difference between it and iNaturalist, and working with a bunch of partners to integrate all this and thinking about non-traditional partners. And one of those, when we started and wanted to make sure we included the main prevention partners, the Don't Let It Loose, the Clean Drain Dry, the Play Clean Go, the Don't Move Firewood, but we're also partnering with a new effort called Invasives Free or Invasives Free USA, because we realized that we've got to do this better. We've got to get the public engaged. We've got to figure out and train people on how to do this in a different way. One of the things that a statement that I love is, you know, that the worst words in the English language are, we've always done it this way. And I think that it's very easy in a field to look at things and say, well, that's the way we've always done it. We don't need to do it differently. And so with this now, we're looking at ways to do things differently, turn around, go in a different direction, and see where that takes us. And we decided a way to start that is through a concept of ambassadors. And so because of that, us along with the effort with the Invasives Free group are doing a training this December that I hope some of y'all can make it to. And the concept about this is training invasive species managers at the local level on the skills that they don't get trained on, how to build relationships and partnerships, how to use these branding and marketing programs, how to think about fundraising, how to think about volunteer coordination. And so we built an agenda around bringing people from outside of the invasive species world to help train on how things can be done better in the invasive species world. And so we've got a website, invasivefree.org, and it's also linked off the WildSpotter website. And just looking at a way, we don't want national level, we don't want state, provincial level invasive species managers, because that's not who the target audience is. We want this to be the people at the local level to come and hear from these speakers. And then there's going to be a facilitated exercise at the end where you're given an area and broken up into teams and a problem, and what do you need to do to solve this problem and build that infrastructure to work on this problem within an area. And so there's a website up, invasivefree.org. There's going to be larger announcements about this in the next few weeks. There's a form there where you can sign up and put why you would like to come, and then we'll look at those. We are going to have limited attendance on this because of the way we're going to do those facilitated exercises. But we've got a great lineup of speakers and a few that we're still confirming, and it's just, the hope is we're doing this in Idaho this winter, and the hope is that we're going to learn from this first one, and we're going to offer this in other areas to make it easier on travel and help build that group of local level people who can help get the community, help get people engaged. It's not about getting invasive species reports in. It's not about that. We're missing the point when that's what we think about. The point is, we need to get the public caring about invasive species and the harm they cause and the impact they have. And once we do that, then they will come with the data, they will contribute, they will be involved, they will want resources put into these areas. So with that, I want to thank my team here at UGA, Joe LaForest and Rebecca Wallace, who I would not be able to be here, along with Selena McAllister, our office manager, and then a great team of programmers and specialists that help make all the things you saw today possible. So thank y'all. These are some of our new local educational tools, a black and white tegu and a cane toad that are now living in our office to help. And it's amazing you pull those out, and the interest from the audience comes up very quickly. So I'll be glad to answer any questions or clarify anything. And thank y'all for listening and joining today.
Thank you so much, Chuck. That was a very, very interesting presentation. I love so many aspects that you pull into this from, it's not just an app, you're bringing in the pest model and making sure you're checking all the boxes. And I think that it's always very well done. And EDDMapS and you and your team always find a way to integrate it with as many things as possible. And you guys do a fantastic job with that. I have a couple questions while we're waiting for the audience to, turn on their thinkers. But you mentioned that, now you're trying to really focus on that engaging the public aspect and getting them involved and learning about why this is important. And it's not just about reporting. As part of WildSpotter, is there a portion of it where users can, maybe take like a commitment or to doing certain things that can prevent the spread of invasive species, or like actually hit a check mark like today I brushed my boots, or like those types of pathways to also engage the public and track that?
No, but it's something we haven't talked about it from that exact standpoint, the way you looked at it, and I think that would be a really good way of doing that. We got everything ready for Wild Spotter, and then COVID hit, and so it really we have packets of boxes that were supposed to go to every national forest, but when they weren't going to their office, we didn't want to send those out. So we've had to kind of regroup as this is as time things have opened back up with this. But one of the things we've talked about very seriously, we just couldn't get it done for this field season, was being able to track volunteers and volunteer groups. Like, there's a lot of efforts with weed wrangles and that process where you go out and you do a cleanup. And so just having a reporting tool for those groups to be able to report to a centralized place how much time, how many people, how much area was cleaned up. That's been more where we're thinking, but I think that concept of becoming a wild spotter, and by becoming a wild spotter, here's what you do in terms of checking different boxes. The Canadian Council, I think, had a great graphic one time that was, I don't move fire. It was each of the different programs, and it was kind of a check mark with each one of those. And so I think it was Canadian Council that did that. But it's that kind of concept. It's, maybe we need to think about, let's take a pledge to do it, and let's our focus right now has been, if we can get the local people that are managing these programs, that is the best connection to the public. And so, getting them to do these trainings and getting them to understand what it takes to maintain a program like that at the local level. And then that would be kind of where they would get their volunteers to do some of those things. But yeah, I think that would be a great thing that can be added to the app as well.
Absolutely. And you're right. I mean, even here in Sault Ste. Marie, I know there's a number of local organizations that already do, garlic mustard pulls and talk about boot brushing and all of that. So a way to kind of give them the tools that they need is excellent. That being said, so Wild Spotter and these other platforms that you've talked about that aren't offered in Canada right now, is that something that could be done in the future?
Yeah, and the invasives free concept was modeled after a predator free project in New Zealand. And so the logo for that has USA on the bottom, but there's no reason why that has to be USA. The initial focus of Wild Spotter was the National Forest, because it was the Forest Service that came to us with wanting to do this. There's no reason why anything in Wild Spotter could not be made to work today in Canada. It's just that, other than changing that byline that says mapping invasives in America's wild places, we can definitely map invasives in Canada's wild places as well. So I think that's something that there could be a lot of opportunity. It's just trying not to confuse the issue and understand that this is EDDMapS light. Let's think about it as that's what Wild Spotter is. It's branding from a standpoint of outdoor recreation, and that's the audience we're trying to get. It's a different audience than people who are going to go to a training course and learn about invasive species. You can get them to download the EDDMapS app, but how do you get to the people that just stumble across the app in the store? And so that's what we're trying to improve on.
Absolutely. Well, thanks. Yeah, thank you. We do have a couple questions coming in. Can you provide me more information on who can become a verifier and the process for establishing new verifiers in EDDMapS?
Yeah, and that really varies by what state or province you're in. Depending on who our partner organizations are in the area, usually they are the ones that are the gatekeepers for who the verifiers are. Now, if you are in Michigan and we've got a whole bunch of data in Michigan that needs verifying, and you want to help verify, and you have the expertise to verify, there is a form on the website where you can request to be a verifier, but those are in a lot of cases left up to the local jurisdictions to make those decisions.
Okay, awesome. Oops, I tried to type the website into the chat, and I didn't type it right.
Yeah, and the other question I can answer while you're doing that is, and then wildspotter.org is the WildSpotter website. Will the ambassador training be available online? This first one will probably not be, but just because of part of what we're trying to do with the way we're formatting this training is building the community among the attendees. And so we're probably going to limit this to about 100 to 150 people and really trying to build a team there where they have resources to contact. And so I think doing it as an online training is a great concept. But the way we would structure it would be different than the way we're going to structure this initial one. So if it works out where we can record some of the keynote talks, then we will definitely do that and make those available. But this is the first time we're trying this. And there's been the Innovations in Invasive Species Management Conference that's been held in Nashville and was also held in Idaho at one point in 2019, I think. And so we are kind of hijacking that conference, and that conference is not happening this year. And we're doing this as it's a training. It's not a conference. There's no abstract submissions. There's no poster sessions. There's none of that type thing. It's going to be, you come and have 3 days of instruction and entertainment. There's some very interesting talks and a Teddy Roosevelt reenactor person is coming, and he is great. And I'm always skeptical of those kind of people, but he's great, and he's going to take and do his spiel as Teddy Roosevelt, but focus it as around invasive species and their harm to the environment. So that's going to be one of the evening sessions is going to be part of this. And so that's it's pulling in some people. It's pulling in some people we know and from people that are in the community and are doing stuff at the local level, but also pulling in some non-traditional people to come in and talk about different topics that we haven't really thought about. And so my group at the University of Georgia, the Forest Service and Invasive Plant Control, are the key planners and organizers for this. And so, but it's all wrapped around this concept of WildSpotter and engaging the public and changing the way we think about how we do some of the things we've done and how we can do them better.
Awesome. Thank you. That certainly, I'm sure, made people want to go. Sounds very interactive and engaging.
Hopefully, yes. And I mean, I think it's something that, you do it the first time and you get feedback from the people that come the first time. And there's always going to be a speaker that's not going to be as good as you think they're going to be, kind of thing. And so then you do it. I mean, yes, it's in Idaho this year. Well, next time it doesn't have to be in Idaho. Maybe it could be in Sault Ste. Marie, and we could do, take it and adapt it and for the location and for the audience and based on the feedback we get from the first one. And so I think that's a direction that we're going in this. We're going to. It's a resort where everybody's going to be together and meals are going to be provided for most everything as part of the registration. And so it's really about community. So we're doing a lot of things online and the EDDMapS Summit, our registration was lower this year than it has been. And I was a little frustrated with that. I was like, hey, well, it's just Zoom fatigue kind of thing. Well, then I dove into who actually registered. And of the 400 people that registered, there were 200 who had not attended one of the previous summits. And so, they put where they worked, and most of them worked at the local or the state provincial level. And when that was a good 70% of the attendees, I go, well, this is the right audience, because those are the people that don't always get to go to conferences, don't always get to travel. And so because of, and that's why we're going to keep doing the EDDMapS Summit virtually, because who the audience we're trying to get to is not you can't do that in person and get and get as much impact as you can do it online. So I love the question of doing the investor training online, and we will do that. It's just we got to get through the first one first. So, but
absolutely.
Give EDDMapS a shot. Give WildSpotter a shot. Take a look if you haven't. And yeah, appreciate it as always.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And I'm just going to pop up on my screen here again. Thank you for everyone who attended today, tuning in and listening to all of the wonderful things that Chuck and his team at University of Georgia are doing. And thank you, Chuck, again for presenting today and taking the time out of your busy schedule. This webinar was recorded and will be posted on our website at www.invasivespeciescenter.ca. Just a reminder to please take a couple minutes to fill out the survey. We would really appreciate some feedback. And also, a little sneak peek of what's coming next. Our next webinar will be on June 28th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the topic of biological invasions are as costly as natural hazards by Dr. Anna Turbulin. So hopefully we get to see you then, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
No problem. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.